Welcome to the IUCN Peatland Pavilion. Before we start, we're just going to observe the minute silence, given that it's 11 o'clock on the 11th and it's Armistice Day. So just for 60 seconds, if we could observe that, that would be great. Thank you, folks. So again, welcome to everybody who's watching the event here live in the Peatland Pavilion in the middle of COP26, and to everybody who's joined us online via the virtual pavilion, which is beaming around the world. We are thrilled to be here at COP26, talking to you all about the power that peat can play in the fight against climate change. For those of you who have been at COP26 for a while, I can promise you a chance to escape from this indoor environment and explore some of the lovelier parts of Scotland. But first, I'll introduce myself. My name's Anne McCall. I'm the director of RSPB Scotland, which is the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and we are the UK wing of BirdLife International. The RSPB is the largest nature conservation organisation in Europe. We're a movement of over 1 million nature lovers, and we operate across the globe, from the South Atlantic Oceans, West Africa, Indonesian rainforests, to right here in Scotland, where we're protecting species, restoring habitats, and hopefully inspiring people to do the same. So as landowners and conservation practitioners, for some of the most vitally important and some of the largest peatlands across the UK and globally, we have, I think, an incredible repository of knowledge that we want to share about how to deliver gold standard nature-based solutions to climate change, locking up carbon and creating spaces for nature and well-being in our communities whilst we do it. We also advocate to governments about the importance of peatlands and try and ensure that consumers are informed about how their buying choices affect this habitat. We also conduct a lot of scientific research, often in collaboration with partners, into how peatland habitats work and the best restoration techniques to use. So in our session today, what we're going to try and do is showcase a really successful landscape scale partnership, which where we'll be looking at what we're doing for nature, for climate, and for communities. I also hope you'll enjoy the opportunity to hear about a really practical, ambitious project that is delivering at scale. So in terms of the project, we are delighted to be one of 4 different partners that comprise what's called the Cairngorms Connect partnership. And that's what we're going to hear about today. It is the biggest habitat restoration project in the UK. And the other partners we're working with are Wildland Limited, which is privately owned, and NatureScot and Forestry and Land Scotland, which are both public agencies. Cairngorms Connect has a 200-year vision for restoration across 600 square kilometres of genuinely spectacular connected land within the Cairngorms National Park. Now, the partners' ambitions as part of that project, which includes a lot of natural regeneration of woodland and also renaturalisation of watercourses, also includes 10,000 hectares of peat-rich habitats that we're also trying to restore. And they will tell you all about the amazing landscape scale work they're doing during this session. I'm sure it's been said more than once over the course of the last 2 weeks, but we absolutely have to recognise our peatlands as the genuinely remarkable landscapes that they are. The peatlands of the world may hold the equivalent of 3 times the quantity of carbon stored up in all of the world's vegetation. But the potential for us to keep that carbon locked up in the ground is at risk. Through low levels of protection and poor condition, 76% of our peatland habitat in the UK is now degraded, which means that that is releasing 5% of the UK's greenhouse gases every year. That's more than the annual emissions of all of the HGV trucks on the UK's roads. So it's vital that we move to restore and protect these habitats with urgency. Without doing so, we will not reach net zero by 2050. And I think the commitments by Scottish Government of over £250 million over the next 10 years to restoration is a hugely welcome start in supporting that. So, today we have a series of speakers lined up for you. She said, hopefully, as most of them are, yay, hope we do have a series of speakers lined up for you, which is great. We've got a combination of both virtual presenters and some videos from the magnificent Cairngorms landscape. So there'll be a chance to ask questions at the end. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who is Chris Donald. He's the area manager for NatureScot, covering South Highland. He's a founding board member of Cairngorms Connect. And NatureScot is Scotland's nature agency advising the Scottish Government on biodiversity policy and ensuring our collective focus is on nature. Enhancing our natural environment, inspiring people of Scotland to care more about it. NatureScot is part of Scotland's green recovery from COVID-19, stimulating a revival that secures resilience through a nature-rich future for Scotland and an effective response to the climate emergency. This means that by 2030, hopefully, Scotland will be recognised as a world leader in looking after and enhancing nature. So I will hand over to Chris now.
Thank you, Anne. It doesn't take me to tell you that the planet is in crisis. From the declarations of climate emergencies around the world, from the IPBES report predicting millions of further extinctions in the next 10 years, to the IPCC Code Red for Humanity. This is the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration for good reason, a global rallying cry to heal our planet. The Scottish Government's recent programme for government highlights the need and desire for a greener Scotland to help us move towards net zero. It is clear that in order to do that, we need to restore and protect our natural environment in increasingly ambitious and innovative ways. The message from this COP is clear, that climate is nature and nature is climate. Cairngorms Connect is a partnership of neighbouring landowners committed to a bold and ambitious 200-year vision to enhance habitats and ecological processes across a vast area of the Cairngorms National Park. Collectively, we are custodians of an internationally important area of spectacular native pine woods, mountains and wetlands, where golden eagles soar, wildcats prowl and red squirrels forage. Across this vast landscape, a complex community of plants, insects, birds and mammals come together to create a mosaic of habitats found in few other places. By combining our individual resources and expertise, we are enhancing habitats at a landscape scale, unparalleled in Britain. We are expanding the forest, restoring peatlands and wetlands, and working in tandem with natural processes to deliver real benefits for both wildlife and people. Cairngorms Connect aims to take a low intervention approach to encourage natural processes to drive ecological restoration. This approach is vital in helping to tackle the twin nature and climate challenges. Allowing natural processes to flourish also underpins resilience to the impacts of a changing climate. Tackling climate change will restore nature. By restoring nature, we can adapt to mitigate the effects of a changing climate. Together, climate and nature regulate a safe space for humanity. Our approach does not exclude intervention. Given the current state of nature, some intensive management can be necessary. For example, the considerable effort we put into deer management, the effort into removing non-native species and re-establishing rare habitats through planting, and certainly top of this list is peatland restoration. This helps to kickstart nature's recovery and allows us the opportunity to move to low intervention management in the future. Using nature-based solutions helps to mediate the carbon cycle and mitigates the effects of climate change. For example, restoring and regenerating upland and woodland ecosystem ensures that they are far more resistant to weather extremes, and working at the landscape scale allows these benefits to be realised. Water is held up in the upper catchments from functioning bogs and released slowly through coarse vegetation like woodland and scrub to meandering rivers. As we move downhill, we can see how floodplains expand to absorb runoff, protecting our towns and cities and the areas where we grow food against excessive floods. Since 2019, at Cairngorms Connect, we have made significant progress on our land and properties to restore and expand habitats. We restored over 500 hectares of peatlands, planted over 1,000 hectares of woodland, restored 1,000 hectares of floodplain, and removed non-natives from over 1,000 hectares. And we've also restructured 1,000 hectares of woodland for nature. We have developed a proven private and public partnership for nature, working together across boundaries to get things done. This includes the collaborative deer management across 60,000 hectares to achieve woodland expansion and upland restoration in the presence of deer and prove the value of managing a large contiguous area. We have set up multiple research and monitoring projects looking at a mix of ecological, ecosystem services and societal indicators. We have shared positive messages and showcased nature-based solutions at a landscape scale through various media, including national TV coverage. We want, and in fact, it is essential that we include people and their livelihoods in nature restoration and recovery. Perhaps the greatest challenge is to connect ourselves back to nature, to see ourselves as part of nature rather than apart from nature. Decades of thinking that has led us to see ourselves as separate from nature has perhaps been a major contributor to our current ecological calamity. Indeed, the strength of Cairngorms Connect is people, our shared commitment and ambition. Our aim is that the partnership is one that continues to shine brightly for Scotland and put Scotland on the international map of global ecosystem restoration. This is all happening within the UK's largest and finest national park. Innovative approaches like Cairngorms Connect will help us meet our net zero targets in Scotland by leading on nature-based solutions to climate change at scale. In NatureScot, we argue that with the environment crisis we face, we need to transition to maintain a net zero economy founded on a reviving nature. And in line with the principles of the just transition, our primary focus is on working with people and nature to address this nature-climate crisis. Now we have a film to show you of the restoration work being undertaken on RSPB Scotland's spectacular Abernethy National Nature Reserve, where work is going on in the remote locations 800 metres above sea level in the Cairngorms to repair damaged peatlands. This is part of our partnership, helping to transform the wider Cairngorms landscape. Together with funding from Scottish Government through Peatland Action, we are working hard to make sure our peatlands work for the climate and work for nature. Thank you.
We're up on Anlurg on the Abernethy Reserve. 10 kilometres out from the nearest road, I should think, up pretty high, about 800 metres up in the air. A long way out from any civilization. So we've got some peatland restoration contractors in their diggers, and they're basically working on this degraded peatland ecosystem. They're reprofiling peat hags so that the water doesn't flow through them as quickly, doesn't keep eroding the peat off the site and down to the rivers. So yeah, peatland restoration work kind of at its best. Another gang coming in with a helicopter, dumping off stone, which we use to form dams, which again slow the flow of the water off the peatland site. So all about restoring the peatland and capturing the carbon up on the hill. A big old operation, and getting them out here I think took them all day, one day driving up from the reserve down in Forest Lodge, all the way up, vehicle tracks, and then a couple of miles over the hill as well. So a big logistical challenge for sure getting them here. So the site they're working on this year is 92 hectares, which kind of by itself is sort of a similar size to a lot of nature reserves, particularly in England or in the lowlands of Scotland, you know, a fair chunk of land. And then that's part of about 1,000 hectares of degraded peatland that we'll be working on over the next 5 to 10 years. And then that sits within the wider Abernethy Nature Reserve, which is 14,000 hectares of forest and mountain and lochs and rivers. Then that itself sits within the bigger Cairngorms Connect partnership area. You know, real massive landscape scale stuff. To do the work we need funding. Funding's come from Peatland Action that's administered by NatureScot, and then we've got support from the National Park Authority's Peatland officer that's going to give us a lot of practical advice about how to do it. And then also we've got support from Cairngorms Connect with funding from the Endangered Landscapes programme, which is helping us to manage the contractors on the site. So a real big partnership project, need all these different organisations and people to come together to make this happen.
About 20% of Scotland's land area is covered by peatland. A very large proportion of that area is damaged or degraded. So approximately 75% of the area of peatland is degraded in some way. So this is an eroding peat bog that is gradually losing carbon because it's either being washed down a river or lost to the atmosphere. What that essentially means is that the sources of emissions are balanced with the sinks of emissions by 2045. So at the moment, everything we do produces greenhouse gas emissions from its sort of industry, through transport, through business, through the food we eat. They're producing emissions, they're the sources of emissions. And then there are sinks, there's carbon being taken out of the atmosphere. And that can happen by planting trees, for example. A healthy peatland will store carbon, so it locks carbon in the ground. And unhealthy peatlands release carbon. So in the context of trying to get to net zero by 2045, we have to make sure that we sort of restore, enhance, move back to sort of protect our peatlands so that they work for us, so that they store the carbon, and so that we reduce the emissions from the land.
that's what it's all about, really. You know, we spend a lot of time planning these projects. There's a lot of paperwork needing done, a lot of organising contracts and health and safety and planning all the detail, and then it all comes to fruition after, you know, sometimes a few years of planning, and then in a couple of years we'll come back up here and we'll see the difference that it's made. You know, we'll see the sphagnum and the heather starting to regrow, and the peatlands hopefully by then will have stopped eroding, starting to rebuild. So yeah, it's when it all comes good.
This is a fantastic project because it makes real something that can often seem abstract. So in my day-to-day work I talk about climate policy, about the role of land use in changing or contributing to mitigating climate change. But here is really tangible. Here there is work that's going on the ground to limit the emissions of carbon from the land.
And does it make all those meetings and reports worthwhile to see this?
Yes.
What a great video. I always love seeing it. Next we have a recorded talk from the RSPB's Richard Mason, who featured in that video. Richard is the conservation manager at our Abernethy Reserve, and the team here work across a landscape from forest through to moorland, right up to the highest mountain tops, restoring and managing habitats and species. It's one of the RSPB's largest nature reserves in the UK. And here the forest is expanding rapidly through natural regeneration and also through targeting very sensitive planting of broadleaf trees. The team have also been restoring bog woodlands within the forest since the 1990s. And more recently, they've started, as you saw, restoring a great deal of degraded peatland. In the short video, Richard's going to explain why this work is important for wildlife and for people.
Hi there, I'm Richard. I work here for the RSPB at Abernethy, and I'm just here on a restored forest bog in the middle of the woods. And this decades ago would have been drained, drains dug through it to take the water away and dry it out so that it could be planted for a timber crop. And that would have caused a lot of damage both to the local ecology, the local wildlife that would have been here, but also by drying out the peat soil and releasing the carbon locked in that peat both into our rivers by being washed away from the peat bog here, but also directly into the atmosphere when it oxidizes and becomes carbon dioxide. And you know, those two things on a big scale around the UK and the world, the drainage and the damage to our wetlands, has a massive impact both on ecology but also on people, by polluting our rivers, polluting our atmosphere, contributing to climate change, contributing to the ecological crisis that the world's in now. But luckily, all around the world, there's all sorts of projects to restore that past damage. You know, here, for example, colleagues of mine 15-20 years ago put dams in the drains, and that trapped the water back on here. And now you'll see behind me, it's a nice wetland area here. You can hear the squelch of the peat, and you can see sphagnum moss growing in the water all around. So this is a tale of restoration, and now you come here in the summer and it's alive, it's thriving with wildlife. You know, there's birds have colonised like goldeneye, like sandpipers, both breeding nearby, but also it's alive with dragonflies, with mosquitoes, with midges, with water beetles, with a whole array of life. And you know, it's a joyous place to come to in the warmth of the summer here. And there's a similar story in a lot of our peat bogs out in open ground on moorland, both in the lowlands but also in the uplands here in Scotland, where historically they were degraded by maybe drainage for planting trees again, or grazing by high levels of livestock, or damage caused by machinery, or even by acid rain. You know, a whole range of impacts that humans have had on these peat stores. And similarly, that just erodes that peat into the atmosphere, into the river. It harms the wildlife that's there. And you know, now it's within our power to restore you know, huge areas of peatland, again, both here in the UK but also around the world. And you know, I'm fortunate enough here to be involved in peatland restoration works happening at Abernethy in partnership with Cairngorms Connect and the National Park Authority, and with NatureScot, all working together to block drains, to revegetate bare peat, and to get that peatland back alive. And up there, that will benefit another different array of species, things like dunlin and golden plover, again also mosquitoes and midges and dragonflies, but they're all part of the food web and the you know, the ecosystem that these places support. So, you know, I think great strides are being taken at the moment to restore peatlands, but meanwhile, again, both in the UK and globally, we're still damaging peatlands and wetlands in general. We're still draining them, we're still polluting them. You know, they're being lost even now. Even now, we know the potential impact of that. So we need to stop that. We need to look after these places. We need to cherish them. And the ones that we've damaged in the past, we need to fix them. We need to restore them. We need to get that peat building back up again and get that wildlife back. And you know, that's both for us now, improving our own air quality, our own water quality, but also for future generations. You know, our kids, our grandkids. You know, the ecological and the climate crises that are facing the world now, they're happening now, and they're gathering pace. And action now and over the next few decades is what's really going to make the difference for our kids and our grandkids. So places like this, you know, I want to be able to come back here with, you know, with my daughter when she's my age and tell how this has happened around the world. You know, we've restored our peatlands and our wildlife's coming back. But yeah, I think there's a tale of hope here. It can work, it can happen. This is pretty small scale. This isn't really changing the world, but brings me a bit of hope to come here and see some of those birds and see some of those insects. Even getting bitten by the midges and the mozzies isn't so bad when you know it's all for a good cause. So I'll just leave you with a look at this restored bog behind me and leave you in a bit of peace and quiet. But thank you for listening, and yeah, I hope we can all tackle the crises facing the world together by looking after what we've got and restoring it where we can.
Fantastic talk there from Richard, and I hope you're really starting to get a feel for the type of habitat and the environment we're talking about today. And next we're going to take you on a trip up what's called Glen Tromme within the Lynaberach estate, and that's part of Wildland Limited, again inside Cairngorms National Park, where there is a huge restoration effort underway to repair the damage done to peat by deer, which is a particular problem here in Scotland, and also by heather burning, another big problem we've got here in Scotland. So this short film should show you some of the techniques that are being employed to restore the peat, and how local solutions and local people are playing a really key role in combating the climate crisis.
So we're in Lynaberach Estate here up Glen Tromme. This is a peatland restoration scheme we've been working on for a few years now. We're particularly active within the Cairngorm area and the Monalee Mountains too, as well as undertaking work elsewhere in Scotland.
Traditionally, Glen Tromme Estate had very high deer densities. There was also quite a bit of burning of heather. So over the years, even back to the Industrial Revolution, acid rain, etc. What we've inherited is a degraded peatland.
The Park Authority is now got its own peatland action grant scheme, and we are developing a big team to actually restore peatlands across the park. We think something like 90,000 hectares are damaged.
Peatlands, when they become degraded, become net emitters of CO2. The goal behind the peatland restoration work is to reverse and halt that process.
When we're trying to get peatlands restored, one of our key things is we're trying to make them wetter, because once they dry out, the vegetation changes. We also want to revegetate the bare peat, and we want to slow the flow of water so you have less sedimentation.
So the peatland project here, we're using a range of techniques. We're using both excavators as part of the peatland restoration works, and we're using hand-built techniques as well. So there's Hagerty profiling, bunding within the gullies to help to retain water on the peat bogs and prevent them from draining quite so quickly, and undertaking spot turfing work to limit areas of bare peat.
Our ethos is really trying to find local solutions and employ local people where possible. McGowans have been very innovative over the last few years, getting involved, getting the equipment required and the skill level required to do this restoration. So for us it's really simple. We're finding a local solution to the global climate crisis.
To date we've undertaken stone dam work, so we've mined, collected and moved piles of stones to the gullies and built stone dams within the gullies to help to slow down the water flow down the gullies. We're currently cutting mulch down here at the bottom site, which will be flying up and using that to help reinstate bare peat areas. Another technique we're using is the use of cocoa mesh. It's a biodegradable geotextile material, and we're using that on some of the bare peat areas again to help stabilise them and encourage vegetation to regrow.
At Wildland we are probably best known for regenerating the Caledonian pine forest, but actually our 200-year vision is actually to restore all the habitats from the mountain tops down to the river valleys. So the peatland is an important component.
People look at peatlands and think they're quite dull, but if you actually get down on your hands and knees, they're actually full of life. Sphagnum is one of the key components of peatlands, and that can be amazingly coloured moss that you get all over peatlands. And then peatlands are good for things like you have dunlin and golden plover, your dragonflies are good. So peatlands are great for biodiversity. It's not just about the carbon that's in the peat, it's also about restoring those peatlands so they're good for the plants and animals that live in them.
To get a real chance to enjoy some of the habitats that we've got around the Cairngorms Connect area. Now, the next bit of footage we've got is a talk by Megan Critchley. She's the Programme Officer at the UN Environment Programme World Conservation Monitoring Centre. UNEPWCMC works with scientists and policymakers worldwide to place biodiversity at the heart of environment and development decision-making, to create better outcomes for people and for planet. So in Megan's presentation, what we're going to hear about is how the restoration activities at Cairngorms Connect are having an impact on climate change mitigation efforts. And this work was generously funded by the Endangered Landscapes Programme.
Hello, I'm Megan Critchley, a Programme Officer at Unit WCMC, and I'll briefly be discussing some of the climate change mitigation benefits of the landscape restoration activities occurring at Cairngorms Connect. Recently, Unit WCMC and partners at the RSPB and BirdLife International have been undertaking analysis to measure the climate change mitigation potential of landscape restoration projects in the Endangered Landscapes Programme, which aim to restore habitats across Europe, including the Cairngorms Connect project. By doing so, the contribution of different land use and management interventions to the resulting greenhouse gas balance could be better understood, inform future management plans, and demonstrate how these activities come together at the landscape scale to reduce emissions and sequester carbon. Within the Cairngorms Connect, the Wildland Limited project was evaluated using the exact carbon balance tool. Wildland Limited are a private partner covering about 50% of the Cairngorms Connect partnership area. The assessment focused on the interventions which had occurred between 2000 and 2020 and included substantially reducing the deer population and improving grassland conditions through reduced grazing intensity, as well as reforesting native woodlands and rewetting 449 hectares of eroded blanket bog. The greatest contributions to the greenhouse gas balance of the project resulted from direct and indirect impacts of reducing the deer population. The direct emissions were estimated to have been reduced by just over 87,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, and subsequent grassland improvements from the reduction in grazing intensity sequestered a further 209,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent into grassland soils. Natural regeneration of native woodlands was estimated to have sequestered about 11,500 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, outweighing the emissions from deforesting some non-native plantations. These forests will also continue to lock up carbon in their biomass as they continue to grow. Finally, the restoration of eroded blanket bog was estimated to reduce emissions by approximately 4,620 tonnes of CO2 equivalent over the 20-year timeframe, or 10.2 tonnes per hectare, and restored blanket bog will continue to sequester CO2 over time. Overall, the project was estimated to result in greenhouse gas emissions reductions or sequestration of about 300,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, or almost 10 tonnes per hectare. To put this in perspective, in 2019, EU emissions were thought to equal about 6.7 tonnes of CO2 per person. So the emissions reductions resulting from this work would be equivalent to the annual emissions of about 45,000 EU citizens, which is just slightly smaller than the current population of nearby Inverness. As the assessment tools focused on land use and management change, they did not take into account the ongoing carbon sequestration from the 5,740 hectares of intact peatlands which exist in the project area. These peatlands directly sequester about 3.54 tonnes of CO2 per hectare every year. Only a fraction of the eroded peatland within the project area was rewetted during the assessment period, with 5,271 hectares of peatland remaining eroded in 2020. Rewetting these could reduce total emissions by 2.74 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per hectare per year, or 14,497 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per year over the whole area. The results of the project demonstrate that climate change mitigation is an important co-benefit of landscape restoration, where the main aim is to conserve biodiversity and restore natural processes. In particular, rewetting peatland was demonstrated to reduce emissions substantially, and there's still potential to rewet large areas of eroded peatland within the project area, which could lock up large amounts of carbon into the soils. Cairngorms Connect has a 200-year vision, and this assessment provides only a snapshot of 20 years in about half of the project area. Over the course of the project timeline and over the full area, the potential to reduce emissions and sequester carbon could be huge. Therefore, it's important to widen these evaluations to cover the whole landscape and the various restoration processes occurring. Furthermore, this climate change mitigation is only one of many multiple benefits provided by the project, which also improves habitat to conserve Scotland's wildlife and provides economic opportunities to local communities, amongst many others. Thank you for listening, and I would like to thank Wildland Limited and Cairngorms Connect for their inputs, and in particular Thomas McDonnell and Jeremy Roberts. I'd also like to thank our funders at the Endangered Landscapes Programme and partners at RSPB and BirdLife International, as well as the rest of the UNET WCMC team for all the hard work and inputs.
I think one of the critical things for me around the entire Cairngorms Connect project is that we're not just doing the restoration, we're not just working in partnership, we're not just working with communities and individuals, but we're also doing a huge amount of science to monitor what the actual impacts are so we're able to verify it and report on it. And so for the next slot, I am incredibly pleased to introduce Sydney Henderson. She's the Communications and Involvement Manager for Cairngorms Connect. She's joining us virtually today. People are of central importance to the Cairngorms Connect project, And Sydney's work focuses on involving people from staff, volunteers, partners who you've heard again are Wildland Limited, NatureScot, ourselves at RSPB and Forestry and Land Scotland, and also critically local communities. Sydney also leads on Cairngorms Connect communications, working to share the inspiring messages of Cairngorms Connect with audiences far and wide. And alongside this role, Sydney is also a representative for the RSPB's Youth Forum and a member of the Cairngorms Youth Action Team. So over to you, Sydney.
Thank you very much, Anne. So as we've heard this morning, Cairngorms Connect has ambitious aims to restore peatland habitats and processes across vast areas of blanket bog and bog woodland. This work would simply not happen without people, and people are an integral part of the Cairngorms Connect partnership. And this may sound obvious, but it always bears repeating in a world that all too often sees people as separate from nature. People are a part of nature and must be considered as central to the climate change solutions and mitigation. People make climate change solutions possible, and people will suffer, as many already are, if we don't act now to restore habitats and natural processes for their own sake and for the sake of our planet. In the fight against climate change, nature is our strongest ally, and we as people need to act accordingly, to work together to give nature the kickstart it so desperately needs. From the people who make this work possible to the people whose lives are being impacted by the effects of climate change, to all the people in this room here today, we cannot consider peatland restoration without people. Cairngorms Connect, as the biggest habitat restoration project in the UK, is an example of what can be achieved if we work together, prioritising people, nature and climate. On a global scale, I acknowledge that the 60,000 hectares that make up the Cairngorms Connect area is relatively small. But through people, we are so much more than 60,000 hectares, and by working together, we are so much more than the sum of our parts. Cairngorms Connect demonstrates what is possible, but the possibilities are endless. The four main Cairngorms Connect partners, Wildland Limited, NatureScot, Forestry and Land Scotland, and RSPB, represent a range of organisations from private landowner to government organisations to a nature conservation charity. And it is through collaborating and prioritising partnership that we succeed. The Cairngorms Connect partnership is made up of 55 full-time equivalent roles, ranging from stalkers, schools officers, wardens, administrators, and many more. This makes Cairngorms Connect a major employer within the region, important for people's livelihoods and the local economy. Our peatland restoration work offers some unique challenges for involving and engaging people. As you've heard earlier, our work focuses on high altitude peatlands at around 700 metres above sea level. And for most people, this means this area is inaccessible. It's not an area you can easily access by road. It's not something you can see from your kitchen window. And bogs are, by nature, wet and boggy. So they're not exactly easy to access and walk through for recreation either. So for many people, peatlands and peatland restoration work doesn't concern them. Not only can it be a challenge to engage and involve people in our peatland restoration work due to the inaccessibility, but the benefits we derive from peatlands largely go unacknowledged, unfelt and unseen. As I'm sure you're all aware and has been covered in peatland discussions throughout COP26, peatland restoration prevents carbon emissions and healthy restored peatlands sequester carbon. But there is not only the climate benefit. Through our peatland restoration work, we're helping peatlands to store water within the catchment, reducing flood peaks and improving water quality. Peatlands within the Cairngorms Connect area have been historically damaged by overgrazing, exposing the peat to runoff and erosion. These peatlands are at high altitudes, so there's high exposure and a relatively short growing season, meaning the fragile vegetation has little chance to recover. Water rushes off eroded peatlands in deepening gullies, increasing flood risk for communities downstream. Through movement of turf and installation of large granite dams, we're trapping and retaining water within the peatlands, slowing down water flow and giving the vegetation a chance to re-establish, which in turn stabilises the peat. As peatland restoration slows water flow and mitigates flood risk, the benefits become more tangible. Through decreased flood risk and improved water quality, which benefits everyone from wild swimmers who dip in our lochs and rivers to anglers and fishermen and women. Peatland restoration does affect our lives and the lives of our local communities as much as they can seem like these remote alien landscapes far away from our everyday lives. Alongside this, as we've heard earlier, Cairngorms Connect employs local contractors to deliver the peatland restoration work, And as I speak, a team of local contractors are out on Anlurg on the RSPB Abernethy Reserve, which we saw in the High Hopes film earlier, working hard to restore our peatlands. In the last year alone, Cairngorms Connect has spent $200,000 on services and contracts within 50 miles of the project area. This economic expenditure is being monitored as we hope to quantify the economic benefit of habitat restoration projects to local communities and economies. There are around 14,000 people living within the Cairngorms Connect partnership boundary, but we do not exist in a vacuum, and it's important to engage and involve with many people from all across the world to give us the strongest chance. Shortly, we'll be hearing from our Icelandic connections on the value of sharing knowledge and collaborating across boundaries. In terms of involving other wider groups of people in our peatland restoration work, art is a powerful tool. Cairngorms Connect is working with 3 local artists in residence through the Endangered Landscapes Artist Residencies. One of these artists, Amanda Thompson, worked with our Assistant Monitoring Officer, Erica, on a piece of creative writing exploring peatlands through the format of a diary. This piece of creative writing offers a different perspective on our peatland restoration work, and I'd like to read an extract from it now. This place can feel desolate, empty, but of course it's not. Walking on the plateau, we see red grouse flying out almost from under us, telling us to go back, go back, go back. On a nearly invisible path, red deer tracks are imprinted across the peat. Between grass and heather, the deep browns of bare peat become almost black in shadow, and we dip down and around them, sometimes encountering deep peaty pools of uncertain depth that reflect the sky and the insects that scoot across them. Micro moths are stirred up from the sedges and heather. There are bright greens and sometimes reds of sphagnum mosses, deer grass that from afar look on fire. While we can't imagine these landscapes as they used to be, or how they might change once more, that's what we need to do in order to imagine a more hopeful future. So to conclude, without people, Cairngorms Connect simply would not function. Habitat restoration work benefits us all, from the people employed by the partnership and the local contractors to local communities who benefit from improved water quality and decreased flood risk. I'd now like to present to you the film People in the Landscape, which tells the story of 5 people in the Cairngorms Connect landscape.
For me, it's really important to be out in nature for some time every day, even if it's only a very short time. If we can help people to connect to nature, then they will feel better. If I'm feeling low, I just take myself off outside, and within minutes you're lifted. It just has this wonderful power to keep you calm.
It's great to come to work each day. I mean, it's a fantastic location. You just have nature all around you. For a long time, we've looked to take what we can from the land without really thinking whether it's sustainable or not. I mean, Cairngorms Connect is important to businesses like mine. It directly affects it in that I can employ up to 10 people who are all local to the area. But the project is going to span generations, so there will be opportunities that reveal themselves along the way.
Historically, conservation in the UK has been human-centric and small-scale. It's this idea that we're separate to nature and we need to take care of nature and make sure that it stays the way that we want it. Restoring natural processes, like Cairngorms Connect is trying to do, completely turns that on its head, and it restores the power to the natural environment itself. For too long, tried to pretend that we can separate ourselves from nature, and we absolutely can't, because we're part of nature.
There's a lot of beneficiaries from the project itself, and I'm definitely one of them. The location for me is everything when it comes to my fitness retreats. When people come to the Cairngorms, not only do they want to be involved with fitness, but they want to be part of the nature, switch off mentally and work on themselves physically. Hopefully we can keep building the ecotourism in the area to highlight how amazing the surroundings here are.
We belong here, we belong in the hills and the mountains. In this world that we live in today, a world where we're bombarded by information, we need the ability to escape. We have to have that opportunity to get away from all that, even just for short periods of time, and see the real world for what it is.
If we can't sustain nature with people in the landscape, then we basically can't sustain nature.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that video. And as we just heard from Alban in that video, Cairngorms Connect has a 200-year vision, which means this project spans generations. Young people and future generations are an integral part of our vision, and we've been working with local group of young people, the Cairngorms Youth Action Team. I chatted with one of their members, Anya Taylor, about her feelings on involving young people and her hopes for the future. Could you introduce yourself to say who you are and what you do?
My name's Anya Taylor. I'm 25 years old and I currently work in policy for community justice. I've been involved with Cairngorms Youth Action Team for around 3 years. I'm from the Highlands, although I recently moved away from the Highlands.
What is your connection to the Cairngorms?
Yeah, so I grew up in Inverness, that's where I'm from, so I spent a lot of time in the Cairngorms growing up. I really love it. It's a place where I just feel so peaceful. It's one of the first places where I want to go home to when I return. But also, I suppose for me, it's been such a great space to get out to and remind myself of nature and feel closer to that. Because I suppose sometimes not that Inverness is a big bustling city or anything, but it's definitely nice to have that on your doorstep. Like I've always been so lucky to have that. So yeah, it means a lot to me.
What role do you think young people have to play in the solutions to climate change and in climate change mitigation?
I think young people have to be the solution entirely. I think they have to be the ones that come up with them and drive them, because they're the ones that are going to have that consistency and keep going with it. We can't be coming up with decisions in one corner and not actually engaging the people who are going to need to do that. So absolutely, they need to be right in the centre of that. And I also think, young people want to be in the centre of that. It's not that they're disinterested or any of that. So yeah, absolutely central to it. Yeah.
What do you think some of the barriers could be in getting young people kind of front and centre of these sort of climate change solutions and things like peatland restoration work?
I think there's lots of barriers. I think one of the ones that I suppose I maybe felt, so I'll talk about that first and then talk about some of the others, but I definitely felt like I didn't know enough, or I didn't have that kind of understanding of more of the complexities of it, I guess. I knew that climate change is something I was interested in and thought was really important, but I don't think I understood the science behind it necessarily always. And I understand a bit more now, but actually still nowhere near as much as some of the people around me. And I think that's a big barrier, because people don't feel like they can join in that conversation and that they can be part of it. But actually what I'm learning now is I don't necessarily have to learn, and lots of people around me are the same. They don't have to learn that. They just have to be there for that same cause and have that same passion. And actually, as soon as you take that away, I think I realised that I probably did know enough. It was just that illusion that you had to know more. I think that's definitely a big one. I suppose there's lots of barriers that exist in any kind of young people getting involved in things. I suppose around your peers and around what other people think of it. It's maybe not always the most cool thing to talk about, although I definitely think that's changing. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose access to nature as well. Like I came from a place where it was right on my doorstep, so it made sense that I would have an interest in that. I suppose I would feel an attachment and maybe some responsibility as well for it. But if you've never had that, then you don't have any ownership over it. So why would you care? Why would you want to do something about it? Because it isn't part of your life. So I think we probably need to focus on that and really getting people to see that it's their world, and particularly young people to feel like they have a stake in that in order to get them involved.
Brilliant points. Quite a big, scary question. How do you feel about the future of our planet?
Oh, I am actually really quite concerned. Like it is something that sometimes you try to push it to the back of your mind, and that's not possible for me anymore. I just think over the last few years it's become increasingly more concerning, and sometimes I'm just so surprised that not everyone feels that way. I think the world is burning and we are not paying attention, and that is really, really concerning. And I think it's been interesting, talking to peers about this, and I hear more and more people talking about things that they don't plan to do because they're like, well, the world, I don't want to have children because the world's not going to be good for them. And I think, wow, that's a conversation that I've not heard before. So I think people are starting to wake up to that. And I'm talking about not everyday people who are not in the conversation. I think they are starting to wake up to it. But actually, I don't think that kind of real fear has kicked in for people yet. And it should, because if we don't do something now, like that, it's going to be awful. So yeah, not good. I on the flip side, I feel really hopeful because I think there's so much activity happening to try and improve it, and I think it's really exciting to see that, and the world that we create out of this will be a better one, and I think that's a really great thing, and I look forward to that happening, and I just hope that we do that in time. That's my only concern.
Those are my main questions. Is there sort of anything else you'd like to say, or anything else that you didn't feel you got a chance to talk about?
When working with young people, it's really important to just ask those questions and ask how they want to be involved and what that would look like for them. I think quite often, and we are all guilty of this in life, we kind of make an assumption of what should happen and what the best route to take is. And actually, the people who know best are those that will be impacted most by it. And in this scenario, young people will be impacted for the longest time. So therefore, it's really important that they're part of that conversation. And I suppose just the message that young people really want to be part of that conversation. This is, in my peers and the people that I talk to, this is talked about more than most other things happening in the world, because it really is at the forefront of our minds. So yeah, let us be involved.
Thank you very much, and a special thank you to Anya for a brilliant interview and for sharing her insight and her passion. She'll also be joining us later today for the Q&A, which is great. I mentioned earlier the importance of international collaboration and learning from each other. And in our next video, I chatted with Jun Frieda, the General Manager at our Icelandic BirdLife partner, who is leading a new project to undertake peatland restoration in northwest Iceland. Earlier this year, she and her colleagues travelled to the Cairngorms Connect area to learn about our work to inform their own peatland restoration work. And we'll find out more about that in the next video. So hello, Jun Frieda. It's great to have you here. Could you tell us a bit about why you've come here and who you are?
Yes, we are here, a group of people here in Cairngorm, from BirdLife Iceland, from the Wetland Fund, from the Agricultural University, from the Soil Service, and then we have RSPB people here also. And we together have a project funded by ELP that is similar to the Cairngorms Connect project, but a bit smaller, very much smaller. But it's about landscape restoration, where we focus on wetland restoration mostly.
So could you just tell us a bit more about why you've chosen to come to find out more about Cairngorms Connect?
Yeah, we have been following the Cairngorms Connect project for a while. We wanted to come because, yeah, we wanted to get to learn from, firstly, how is it to manage such a big restoration project, and also having all this partner together and letting that work. That is quite amazing. And also how this project is in a way, of course, limited to the funding, but the vision of 200 years is quite amazing. It's something that we would gladly think more about. At least it makes you think yes, that this is just not for now, it's forever, actually.
So what are the main lessons that you'll take away from this trip?
The vision of 200 years is very inspiring. So, and also the Cairngorms Connect project is a big conservation project. But ours, although it's a very much smaller, it has the same obstacles. So we have learned a lot.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been brilliant to have you here.
Fantastic. So I hope as a result of all of those videos and the presentations, you've got a much better understanding of what Cairngorms Connect is all about. And we've now got a little bit of a chance. I think we're going to be joined by, she looks hopefully excellent, great. So we've got Chris Donald, we've got Sydney Henderson, we've got Megan Critchley, and I think we've also got Anya Taylor joining us on screen, which is great. So it's a chance now for people in the audience here, but also people online to ask us questions. So I've got some coming in online, and I think I'll just check. Are there any questions in the audience here first? In which case I'll just go straight to the online questions. So I guess the first question that's come in, which I'll just give to I think maybe start with Sydney to kick off, and then others pick up as they wish. But one of the questions we've had online is, what's the most effective way of engaging our communities in the importance of conservation for birds and wildlife?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's sort of the key part of my job, I guess, is, well, not just peatland restoration, but habitat restoration work in general. I think in terms of engaging local communities, it's important to meet people where they're at. So it's not saying, come to us and find out everything from us. It's meeting people where they already are and finding ways to make our work relevant to people in spaces that they're already comfortable in. So using things like art and events to explore these concepts without putting the expectation on local communities to do that work themselves, because that's not fair. It is obviously something that we're learning a lot about as we go. And again, that's why I think it's really important to listen to people and to have these conversations where you're asking people how they want to be involved and how they want to engage with projects like this. I think it definitely does help to be in a partnership, because we've got 4 main partners and multiple supporting partners. So that means we've got a massive amount of resource and different people to draw from, and a lot of learnings that we can share across the partnership. So yes, sorry, quite a lot of answers there, but it's a big question, and I could probably talk about it for half an hour, but I will try not to. But thank you.
Thanks very much, Sydney. Another question that's come in online is, and maybe direct this one to Chris in the first instance, but what are the main challenges that the partnership faces?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's working in partnership is a challenge in itself, but it's also incredibly rewarding. As long as you have the trust between the partners and a shared vision, and as long as we have that trust and we can challenge each other, it's really important. So I would say the challenge is important, and there's an opportunity to take things forward. And then sort of the big one is always funding. We can do things as long as we have the funding, and it's always a challenge really trying to find the resources to be able to do what we want to do. but also to carry on the management, because quite often funding is available for nice new shiny things and for the whatever the sort of zeitgeist is at the moment. But if you've got a 200-year vision, you've got to try and secure funding for quite a long period of time. So there's always going to be that challenge, and we would hope that for our partnership we will always be seen as nice and shiny and important, so that we can always get the funding that we require to do the best for Scotland.
Fantastic, Chris. Lovely to be seen as nice and shiny. Does anybody else want to come in on that one in terms of any other challenges around maybe the science or community engagement?
Well, on the science, I think as we've shown from the work that we've done so far, all the restoration activities in the Cairngorms Connect come together to have a really massive climate change mitigation potential. But throughout all these calculations and the data that we use, there's always a certain amount of uncertainty there. So I think it's really important to keep demonstrating this over time, to continue to monitor the work that's going on, and kind of really show the huge benefits that the project has alongside all the multiple benefits that it has for people as well as nature. And then just sort of, I guess, as Chris said, like keep bringing in the funding as well through those mechanisms.
Great, thanks, Megan, that's super. So can I, some of the other questions that are coming in, one is around how replicable this type of approach might be in other parts of the world. I mean, obviously we saw the Icelandic partners coming to visit. You know, in Scotland, we're looking at doing landscape scale in lots of different places. Do you feel there's lessons that can be replicated in other parts of the UK and abroad? Chris, maybe do you want to come in on that first?
Yeah, I think it's always been an aim of ours to show what is achievable on a big scale, and really sort of work through our principles of working together in partnership. I think what we have here is something that works within the Cairngorms, within the partners that we had available, and we jumped on the opportunities that were available to us. But I think, you know, as long as people can look at us, and we're quite happy to host visits, if people want to come and see how we work and then try to apply those principles to whatever works best in their areas and the opportunities they have. So I think it is, we can reproduce this approach, and we have to work across ownership boundaries, make them fuzzy, and work in collaboration. So yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. It's a bold offer to everybody that you're going to host visits from across all the COP26 participants and everybody online. And leading seamlessly into that, we've actually had a question from somebody saying, I would love to go and see the great work being undertaken by this impressive partnership and the wildlife that is benefiting from it. As it covers such a large area, can you suggest the best locations to go and visit? So I guess this is a chance for each of you to make a pitch for which are the best bits that you would encourage folk to go and have a look at. And Anya, given that you're local, I wondered if you might like to start first.
Okay. I suppose in the Cairngorms National Park, because I'm from Inverness, the places around sort of Aviemore and Granton and the areas around that park, I would definitely recommend going there, because I think you get to see something that's quite unique to Cairngorms National Park is the fact that so many people actually live in that area, and you know, their whole life is in that area, so right in amongst all this fantastic nature. So definitely that part of the world is something I would recommend.
Great. Local recommendations, always welcome, or local-ish. Sydney, have you got a favourite part that you would pitch for folk to go and visit?
Yeah, well, this is probably quite predictable, but because I'm interested in people and getting people in nature, I think the two visitor centres that we've got within the Cairngorms Connect partnership area offer a really good starting point. So that's the Lochgarten Nature Centre and the Glenmore Visitor Centre, and they're both offer really good starting points for exploring the Cairngorms Connect area and the wider Cairngorms National Park. Loads of great resources there and friendly staff and volunteers, so a good starting point to begin your exploration of the area.
Fantastic. So I'll press on a little bit because we've got just a few more questions. This one probably for Chris, but as a question about, can others join the Cairngorms Connect partnership? Do you hope to have other landowners, businesses, NGOs, etc. that will come on board over time?
Well, at the moment we've got enough to be getting on with already. We're not looking for new partners at the moment because we have quite an extensive work program. But the most important thing to us is our principles. And if anybody who is any of the sort of neighbours are willing to sort of sign up to the principles and sign up to the 200-year vision, we'd certainly listen to them and speak to them and see where their commitment's coming from. But at the moment, we're not actively looking for new members.
Great, thanks, Chris. And then I think we'll move to the final sort of online question. With this being such a long-term partnership, how do you plan to bring future generations and communities on board? For example, are you working with local schools to inspire the next generation? And I wonder, Sydney, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, brilliant question. Yeah, we are working with local schools. We've got a schools community learning officer who's been delivering a set of habitat restoration lessons to local schools. And there's more information on that on our website if any other schools are interested in finding out more. In terms of, passing this work on to the next generation and inspiring that cross-generation approach, I think that's where our work with the Cairngorms Youth Action Team has come in, and where I've been working with Anya and other members of the group. I think it's essential because this is such a long-term vision that we do need to be engaging with the next generation now. It's not something we can just do and then hope it'll get picked up by the next generation, because that could be quite unlikely. So I think that's important to do that work now. And we're developing a youth involvement strategy for the partnership, which we're co-designing with the Cairngorms Youth Action Team to make sure it's relevant and fit for purpose.
Brilliant, thanks, Sydney. And I wondered, Anya, if you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, so I've been involved in the work with Sydney, so the Cairngorms Youth Action Team, and then linking in with Cairngorms Connect now. I think it's really important the work they're doing in terms of getting young people involved. And the Cairngorms Youth Action Team, that stemmed from the Europark Youth Manifesto, and the kind of focus on living, learning and working. And I suppose that's something that I would advise other areas, that if they're looking at setting up a similar thing, that youth manifesto was co-designed by young people. It's what we're focusing on and what we use, and I suppose that offers a really good tool. It's flexible and kind of focuses on key areas that young people want to be involved with. So yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. And I guess one of the lessons we've learned across Scotland has been that co-designing of whatever you're doing seems to be the key to unlocking a meaningful longevity for any project. So can I just ask each of you in turn, as a result of having your involvement with the project, how would you sum up your kind of lessons learned from it? I think all of us, when we start a project, have expectations of what it will be like, and then there's the reality of what it actually is like, and then there's the what you might like to do differently or what you think is working well. And I think we've covered quite a lot of the stuff that, fantastic videos, the great answers to the questions, and all of the great coverage that you've given it has told us all about the stuff that works really well. I think what's generally more helpful for those looking to start up similar projects are, what are the things that you might do differently if you had the chance, or what have you learned that is the real take-home message from it? So if I can go around you each in turn and maybe start with you, Chris.
I think the big take-home message from me is that public and private can work together and work together effectively and productively. I think that's really important for me, and that's, as I said earlier, in terms of challenges, we have this, we have challenged each other, and I think that's really important. We haven't just become an echo chamber. We have really put ourselves, each of the other partners, on the spot, and really made sure that we adhere to the principles of the partnership, and we work effectively together. So I think they're the main things that I think that we do really well together. Anything I would do differently, Bill, because it's been quite organic since sort of 2014. And actually, you know, I can sort of trace the origins of the partnership back further than that, back to sort of probably the early 2000s. That really, you know, these things do take time. You know, you can't just sort of instantly just think you just put all the ingredients together and everything will work really well. You've got to put time and effort to them into these things to make them work well, so that when you do get to the stage where you want to get on and do things, then all the pieces in the jigsaw are in place, and you can just crack on and get them done.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. And if I could move to you next, Sydney.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, I've sort of got a similar answer to Chris, I think, in that I've learned that you really do need to put time and effort and prioritize building the internal partnership. So making sure, you know, things as basic as people know each other within the partnership and know who they can ask, and you know, if they do have questions about peatland restoration, they can ask other partners about how they've done it and lessons they've learned. And that, you know, that's as sort of simple as making sure people know each other and are comfortable in asking for help within the partnership. And that comes from putting time and work into building a really collaborative, open, honest space within the partnership where people feel they can, you know, just call someone up from another organization and get their help, and, you know, not be afraid of that. So I think that's the main thing I've learned, is it's so worth investing a lot of time and effort in building up that internal partnership and the internal partnership communication.
Brilliant. It's a very good rule of thumb to know who you're working with, I think. Yeah. Thanks, Sydney. Megan, you want to come in on this?
Absolutely. I think for me, what I've learned is that the Cairngorms Connect project is a really fantastic example of a nature-based solution in action. So from what we've heard, that even the work that's being done has a huge positive climate change mitigation effect, but it also really benefits the local communities and the biodiversity. And we've even heard that it's been inspiring art as well, which is really fantastic. I think personally what I would not necessarily do differently, but want to do more of in the future from a science perspective, is just to get some more work on the ground around monitoring how carbon stocks change over time. And particularly when we're looking at these kind of natural regeneration processes, to sort of really improve the science that we have around that, and to really help the projects like these demonstrate their many, many benefits, and particularly the global benefits that they have in terms of climate change mitigation as well.
Brilliant, great answer. And finally, Anya, over to you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is sort of how interested young people are and how sort of aware they are about the issues. You know, having started to work with some younger young people than myself, actually seeing the difference in them and the views that they have to when I was that age, I think that's really interesting and really inspiring actually to see, and I'm relieved to see that in young people. And I think the passion to get involved is really there, and that's really exciting to me. I suppose the area that I think we need to develop further within our sort of youth engagement is engaging with that wider group of young people who probably wouldn't necessarily engage in a project like this. And I think that that's probably something that applies across the board in most projects, but I think that's really important in terms of our climate, because we have to engage everyone in that process. So yeah, that's definitely something we're trying to work on and look at how we best develop that. So.
Brilliant. And I think you've just paraphrased what Barack Obama was saying earlier this week, which is you can't just keep talking to the people who already agree with you. You have to talk to those beyond your own echo chambers. And I'm sure he's completely right. Anyway, huge thank you to all of our panelists for answering the questions. Thank you to the audience online for the questions. I'll do a last scan around the room in here to check there's no further questions, which I don't think there are. So the people in the room will benefit from some tea and coffee, which has just been provided. Unfortunately, everybody joining us online and all of the folk who just did the hard work in the presentations and the films and answering all the questions, I can't offer you any of that. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the tech team for making it all run so smoothly. And please, everyone who's watching online and everyone who's here, please do come and visit the Cairngorms Connect project, because it's massive, it's fantastic, it's genuinely exciting, and it's delivering at scale. Thanks very much.